Hi, welcome to the Big Bag. My name's Mark Machado. I'm joined by Nick Brookes, who is a cricket historian, writer, journalist, watcher, enjoyer, purveyor of the sport. We are here for your weekly roundup every week, kind of 3:30-ish, let's say. 3:30-ish UK London time, which I think is kind of 9 o'clock-ish, just after 9 in the Indian subcontinent. I think it's about 2:30 in the morning in Melbourne and 11:30 on the east coast of America. Like, we are here every week, every Thursday. We're going to be discussing franchise cricket. There's going to be it's not just me and Nick. There's going to be other people joining us as well. I'm talking to some players about coming along at some point, getting involved, telling us what it's like being a freelance cricketer and playing all around the world. We're here today, though, to talk about SA20. That's reaching its kind of climax. We'll talk about the ILT20. That's also reaching its climax. We're going to ask if the Bangladesh Premier League bus drivers have been paid yet, or the bus driver has been paid yet and given back his all the rest of the equipment he's holding as a deposit. And we're also going to discuss the 100 as well, because the 100 sale, we kind of previewed it last week. I think as we were talking about it last week, Nick, I think we were getting news coming in about various franchises, buy stuff.
The minute news of franchises being sold for big sums.
Amazing. And now we've got our first ever 100 team. It might even be the first, but definitely not the last. That's 100% not owned by one body, by one company. We'll get into that and talk about what it might mean for the future of county cricket and cricket in England. So yeah, we've got a lot to discuss. Nick, let's get straight. Before we do that though, if you're watching at home on your mobile, on the tube, on the train, wherever you are in the world, leave us your comments. We'd love to hear what you guys and girls have got to say. We love when you guys get involved. We'll get to them as well. You can also, the other thing I was going to drop in with Nick, which is cricket related, but nothing with franchise cricket, was talk about Zimbabwe versus Ireland. But only the one aspect I want to discuss is why or how it hasn't ended up being shown in the UK or Ireland, where you'd assume most of the Irish fans live. Nick, let's get into the SA20, though. We know one finalist. That is Mumbai Indians Cape Town. MI Cape Town will be there, and they will either be playing the Sunrisers or Par Royals. Last week, me and you spent a lot of time talking about Par Royals, and since then, it's not really worked out for them.
No, it hasn't. I was thinking today, we talk about Tottenham being Spursy in football, and I think we're starting to see Royals being Royalsy in franchises across the world, right? It was bringing back memories of Tom Kohler Cadmore opening in last year's IPL eliminator. Joe Root has gone and things have fallen apart a little bit. They've lost their last 3. Mitchell Owen's come over from Australia and hasn't been in the runs his first few games. He's just out early in this second qualifier. So yeah, things are going wrong for them at the wrong time. David Miller's been out, but he is back. Luandre Pretorius has been out of the runs, although he hit a shot against Trent Bolt in that first qualifier, just a flick of the wrist that flew into the stands for 6, which was just another reminder of what a special cricketer he might become. But yeah, going all wrong for the Royals at when they want to be peaking, whereas Mumbai Indians Cape Town, the complete opposite is happening, right? They've won their last 6 completed games. They haven't lost a match since January the 15th. In their last group game, they rested everybody and still slammed, I think it was 201 for 5. That bowling unit looks very strong with Rabada, Rashid and Bolt, and at the other end Rassi and Ryan Rickleton are in lots of runs, and it's been a bit of a breakout season for Jewel Brevis, who's someone who I'd like to touch on, Marky.
Go on then, touch on it now.
All right, well, yeah, I've been high on this guy since he burst through from South Africa under-19s into the IPL, since everyone was calling him Baby AB. He was playing for Mumbai Indians when he didn't have a hair on his chest. And you'd say that path to professional cricket maybe hasn't been as smooth as it was expected to, right? He's had some lean scores. He didn't pick up an IPL contract this year, but he's been a really crucial cog for MI Cape Town over the recent matches. He's averaging around 50. He's got 4 not outs in 9 innings. He's struck the most sixes in the tournament. He's striking at around 180. He's pulled off some spectacular catches in the field. He's bowling a bit of leg spin. He's offering a really nice all-round package. And it's easy to forget, because this is a guy who first played IPL 3 years ago, that he's still only 21. So it looks to me like Brevis is starting to come of age. And I think if there are IPL dropouts due to injuries, he'd be a really shrewd acquisition.
It's really interesting you bring him up, right? Because I think there's kind of 2 stories. There's his development as a player, but there's also what's been happening to Mumbai Indians as a kind of wider organization, almost since the point that they bought him, right? Because the point when they buy him 3 years ago, you could, or bring him into the IPL, at that point, it feels like they're the big fish, and I mean financially, in terms of how much money they can put on the table, how many fans that they've got. I think that's definitely still true, but they look like they were about to have a period of dominance in the tournament, right? And then it just all mainly through bad recruitment, all just absolutely falls away. Mahela Jayawardene at that point has moved from being head coach up to global director of cricket. It's also a point when there's kind of the kind of large expansion of IPL teams taking over teams across the globe, including MI Cape Town and MI Emirates. They bring them on board. It felt to me like the last few years the franchise has kind of exploded. Mahela has now been moved back to head coach position. I don't know whether, if he would consider that a demotion or what. But suddenly, you're looking at the SA20, you're thinking MI Cape Town are doing well. You're looking at ILT20, MI Emirates are doing well. And they've kind of rebuilt their team, mainly because there's a mega auction there, so they're forced to do it. And you wonder if the early signs are there that Mumbai Indians, as an organisation, are kind of getting it back together again, and could be a team that dominates the IPL.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all, right? They've taken a lot of heat. I think it's worth saying that when the IPL expanded from 8 to 10 teams, they were hit quite hard because they had probably the strongest side before then. And then there was a mega auction. They've taken a lot of heat as well for this kind of policy of trying to bring through players who are really in their very early stages in their career. I mean, you think of the likes of Brevis, Stubbs, someone like Namandir, I believe, Mafaka, all these guys, even someone like Marco Janssen, who is, I think, fast becoming a superstar now. But these guys who they've given opportunities to at a very early stage, and people around the world are saying, look, guys, there's a mega auction every 3 years. It's not like football. You don't get anything from playing someone who's 17, who's then going to go to another franchise. But look, I think MI are in a really strong position. We'll talk about the 100 acquisition later. And I think when it comes to the IPL, when you've got Bumrah, who's the best local bowler, the best bowler in the tournament, Sky, who's the best local batter, for my money, probably going to be one of the best batters in the tournament. And, someone like Tilak Varma, who is, a really valuable local young player. Hardik Pandya, probably the best Indian all-rounder in the tournament. You've got that little bulk of domestic players who you can build around. And so, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we see another era of Mumbai dominance sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and I do I really admired the idea of them trying to bring players through. Do you remember when they, I think it was the same auction, they took a massive punt on Jofra Archer, who had suffered injury after injury after injury. There was question marks whether or not, how much cricket he'll be able to play. Will we ever see him play a test match ever again? I mean, the branding is red for this show, but we are not we're not here to talk about red ball cricket. But they spent big money on Jofra Archer. They spent big money on Brevis. I liked what they were doing. I think the system wasn't quite ready for them yet. But I think there's a lot of criticism on franchise cricket about the idea about basically why, if you are the Ambanis, why do you want to own a cricket team around the world? But there are certain advantages to it. And one of them is that, you know, you can put these younger players into franchises which aren't as well watched or aren't as moneyed as the IPL, and kind of see them develop through. And that's what I like to see here, right? I wonder, you know, in the thinking, you know, me and you are just regular muggles, basically. We don't have any insight into the way these giant organizations now work. But I wonder who from the SA20, who from the MI Emirates team might be raising eyebrows in actual Mumbai as we head towards the IPL. Because the other thing we do know is that players get injured, players pull out, players have to leave the tournament for various different reasons. So there will be spots up for grabs, right? And yeah, I think it's a good time for the organization. Shall we talk a bit about what the final could look like? We are talking to each other as Pal are playing the Sunrisers. Pal are currently 35-1. Mitchell Owen, who we talked about a lot last week, has gone out for a duck this week. We bigged him up massively after everything he'd done in the BBL, and it's just absolutely not paid off at all for Paul, has it?
No, and I think everyone who is an honest cricket watcher would have desperately wanted him to succeed, but it's the kind of thing that you can see happening, right? I imagine he hasn't played a huge amount of cricket in South Africa before. Some of these tracks, especially the ones Pal play on at home, have been, you know, spin-friendly wickets, quite different to what he would have been served up in the Big Bash. So it hasn't worked out for Mitch Owen, but still, he's made a name for himself. He was bowling at the death for Pal Royals the other day, which was a bit strange. But yeah, I think we'll expect to see a lot more from him. This is an interesting semi-final because Pal have fallen away, but they've made a decent start here with, I mean, Luandre getting a little start. They've got Miller back. I think there's a lot of pressure on those two senior players in the middle order, Miller and Kartik. And on the other side of things, Sunrisers Eastern Cape, really interesting team, very much a bowling side. I think Marco Jansen has been absolutely outstanding, the best bowler in the tournament by a distance, adding handy lower order runs the other night. He and Markram combined, I think, to put on 53 in the last 4 overs to give them a decent total in the eliminator against Joburg Super Kings. Craig Overton's come in and been bowling really well, kind of out of the blue. So yeah, and they've got Bartman coming in at the death overs specialist. So I like their bowling a lot. Their batting has been not quite up to it, but they've got, you know, Markram's in decent touch. I think Tristan Stubbs is starting to show some maturity, taking innings deep. So yeah, this is a fascinating clash. I'm looking forward to watching the second innings once we get off recording this. Pal will be bowling, you know, they're spin heavy. They've been, you know, Walalagay's been doing bits, Majib's been doing bits, but they do have pace bowlers who can come in when the situation arises for it. Mafaka's playing today. We've seen Ngidi and Malinga. So, I mean, I think what's interesting about this culmination of the SA20 is you feel like any of these three teams can beat the other. But I do think Mumbai, who are sitting on watching this, Mumbai Cape Town, who are sitting on watching this, are sitting pretty with the form that their batters are in and the experience and class of their bowlers.
We should talk a little bit about the Eastern Cape iteration of the Sunrisers, because they are going for a third championship in 3 years.
Baby.
Yeah, which I'll be honest, in franchise cricket, that is quite a phenomenal achievement, right? Just with the amount of movement between players, you get the impression it's quite difficult to create a kind of culture in teams, because players move about so much, and also because the tournaments are quite short. I know sometimes it does feel some of these tournaments going for weeks and weeks and weeks, but they're not there for that long, right? But it's amazing how winning breeds winning. And also, it's in T20 cricket, it's about winning at the right moments and the key moments, and put performances in at the right times. And it seems like, even though Sunrisers started off badly this iteration of the tournament, they're ending strong, right?
Yeah, they seem to have built something really special down there. And it's interesting because they're doing it without a real sort of contingent of what you describe as stars, right? You look at their overseas players. Recently, they've been playing 4 English overseas guys: Tom Abel, Liam Dawson, Craig Overton, Richard Gleeson. Not exactly what you'd call superstar names. They have, and they've made stars there, I feel, right? Like O'Neill Bartman's the perfect example. And I really think that Marco Jansen, he'll probably win player of the tournament. I think he's developing into a 3-format star. But yeah, really impressive what they've done, especially bouncing back from a bad start this time. They've got a really solid bowling unit for all conditions. And I think they'll probably get past Pal today and make it interesting in the final, but they need to score runs, right? Abel in that middle order hasn't made a load of runs. I think Markram's their top scorer by a distance. Beddingham's chipped in a little bit, but they haven't had the kind of rounded run scoring that we've seen from Mumbai. So yeah, interesting to see how this all turns out.
It's also interesting when I just look at the squad there, most of the team is under 30, which is quite unusual for a kind of franchise team, right? Because the kind of common thinking is that you peak around 32, 33. But you're like, they've been a lot of them have been together for the last few years, and it looks like they could, in theory, keep them together for another few more. I wonder if actually, not going big, not going out to try and sign up that kind of superstar overseas player is the secret there, and actually it gives them more opportunity to kind of build a culture. I'd love to speak to people involved in it and see what they're doing that's different to other sides. And Nick, me and you've watched a lot of the Lanka Premier League. We're probably the world's biggest Lanka Premier League fans, and one of the kind of continuing themes there has been the Jaffna side have been really consistent over the years, and even though their team has changed quite dramatically, they've kept a lot of their coaching team staff in place, right, from edition to edition. And I just wonder how much that consistency can kind of keep things kind of moving along and ticking along over time, and how important those WhatsApp groups are, because you often hear players talk about that. The minute they get signed up or sign up to a team, they end up in a franchise WhatsApp group, and then the kind of culture is driven from that, which sounds incredible, but there you go, right?
Yeah, and you hear people talking a lot about team environments, especially, as you say, Marky, when you don't have a long time to sort of build cohesion and unity. And I think you're right to mention it's a young squad. Aidan Markram, who's a really strong leader, still only 29. And then they've got, Stubbs and Janssen, both 24-year-old guys. You'd think their primes are still ahead of them, who are, showing themselves to be stars in this league. So, with that solid local core, I think this team is in a really good place for seasons moving forward.
Yeah. Shall we move on and talk a bit about the ILT20? Because that's heading towards its conclusion as well. As we're talking, there's an eliminator being played between MI Emirates and the Sharjah Warriors. The first thing I've got to say about this, and we mentioned this last week, but I think it's worth reiterating again, it's really difficult for us to watch this tournament because it's on the most obscure TV channel in the UK. It's not actually, it's on a streaming platform that isn't mainstream. And I think that's firstly, it's massively disappointing for us because, I'm a Desert Vipers fan because I love Desert. And I can't watch my boys.
Yeah, they've made it really hard to watch. I think a lot of the optics, aesthetics around this league aren't great. I was just managing to tune into a little bit of it before we jumped on this podcast, and there were about 4 people in the crowd, and the belts, the WWE style belts, proudly being displayed on the boundary's edge for whatever highest run scorer, most wickets. Call me a traditionalist, call me a crotchety old man, but I don't think that cricket should be dealing in WWF style belts.
No, I love it. I love the belts.
Yeah, you're into it. I thought you would.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. More belts. Like, I don't.
And I feel like I kind of should love it. Though it's a sign that I'm old and boring. That I'm like, what are they doing to my beautiful game?
whenever there's medals being handed out, remember whoever's commissioned those medals has taken the decision to have medals and not have belts, and they definitely should have belts. But like belts are always better than medals, aren't they? Like undeniably, belts are best.
There is something undeniably cool about belts, but it just doesn't feel. It's just not cricket.
Well, if it gets like that, I've seen loads of players on socials talk about the belts. The players love the belts. They're used to getting medals. They're used to getting little trophies. They need belts, more belts.
All right. Yeah, you're kind of turning me. Fair enough. I take it back. ILT20. You can keep the belts, and I also saw they were bringing the ball onto the pitch with like a proper little mini truck that had the advertiser's name on. I mean, it's all these bells and whistles. Some people are going to like them. A lot of people are going to hate them. But it's a bit of harmless fun, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all harmless. So the final will be the Dubai Capitals will play either the MIM Sharjah Warriors or the Desert Vipers.
All your boys.
All my boys. I'm kind of tongue in cheek about the Vipers. Obviously, I'm a very committed journalist to the franchise cause, so I don't have favourites. But you see, I think this league is just so kind of underselling. It's so gutting that it's difficult to watch and there's no one in the stands. Because I look at some of the teams, you're like, it's really interesting players. It is definitely the best. So the SA20 obviously sucks up almost all the South Africans, if not all the South Africans. And then you can tell the way they put the team together. There's a lot more. It appears to me that there's a lot more structure, right? So you see players coming in to fill a specific role, not just because they're available. It's not just the case of, oh, right, David Warner's available, bring him in kind of thing, right? It's we're looking for a big hitter, we're looking for an opening batter, we're looking for a spinner. And you can see there's more structure the way they put it. The ILT20 teams look a little bit more ad hoc, but I think that's kind of the strength of the league, is that it's kind of the best of the rest, right? We know that players would much rather go to the ILT20 than the Bangladesh Premier League because they get more money. And the Big Bash finish, there's a kind of 2-week gap after the Big Bash finishes, which is the kind of business end of the ILT20 for some of the best Aussie players to play in it as well. So because of it, there is, there is quality in this league, and I just feel it kind of undersells itself, which is I think a real disappointment. And I'm not sure, you can't talk about this league without asking the question, like, who's it for? Who's meant to be watching it? Because it's really difficult to watch. There's no one in the stands. The players get paid quite good money, and they kind of, I suppose, build their reputation. But presumably, you're putting on this cricket match to try and at some point make money out of it. Is it just the nursery for the IPL owners and owners of other franchises? Because it's not just IPL owners there, to kind of just take a look at players that they want to have a look at?
I think if so, it's a very expensive nursery, right, Marky? And I'm sure that the owners might be happy with it being a loss leader for a couple of years, but I think that long term, that's not sustainable. And you're right, they're not afraid to, it does feel a bit ad hoc. They're not afraid to throw cash around. Will Jacks was opening the batting or batting at 3 for Mumbai Indians Emirates today, having played a full season in the SA20. So they've flown him in for a couple of games. Yeah, I agree that this league is underselling itself. I think not getting a UK broadcast deal is pretty shocking. I don't think the empty stands are a good look, but the quality of cricket is really, really good. We've seen lots, there's lots of name value. There have been competitive matches. So yeah, it's a shame that it's so hard to follow in the UK and that it kind of feels like it's operating in this sort of alternative space. I don't know what the answer is. I think getting it on TV is a good start. If they can encourage people to go, even better. Because, yeah, I don't quite see where this league fits in or what the future is for it at the moment, given the way it's sort of played out its first 3 years.
I also feel like there is a large community of people in the Middle East, in the UAE, who like watching cricket.
Well, yeah, we know, right, that there are a huge amount of Sri Lankan expats in the UAE. There are a huge amount of Indian expats. So I don't know why every game seems to have like 5 people in the crowd. It's at that stage.
I wonder if they're overserved, right? If they know that actually it doesn't matter if if the best players in the world are over and they're playing cricket and you can't make it, that's fine because they're going to be back next month. They're going to be, there's Champions Trophy next month. There's a lot of international cricket happening there at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, but I think what the SA20 have done really well is engage with communities, right, and work to bring people into the ground for an experience, not just for the cricket. And the ILT20 doesn't seem to have been able to do that. Whether they can offer, cheap tickets, free tickets, something to encourage families, kids into the grounds. Whether it's, I don't know, a bouncy castle or whatever, just do something to try and get some people there because it makes it a much more compelling broadcast offering.
Yeah, it's still absolutely bizarre to me how well. I suppose the thing is what I can't get is I've never had any sort of money in my life, so like the amount of money that's been chucked at this, that to what it feels like to go nowhere, and I'm sure that's not the case. I'm sure there is a plan here. To me, is really bizarre. That's the only thing.
Is strange. One thing that I have taken away from the league, which is, there's a lot of doom and gloom around in English cricket at the moment. The men have been getting hammered in India. The women have been getting hammered in Australia. But it's really interesting seeing how many English players are making their appearances in these leagues, right? And not necessarily guys who you think of as being stars or being, just outside the England squad. I'm thinking of someone like Max Holden, who's had a couple of games recently and done really well for Desert Vipers. Adam Rossington will be in the final for Dubai Capitals. You've got the likes of, the Vipers are very English heavy, right? With Curran and Lawrence and Hales as well. So yeah, a little boon for English fans that, their teams might be getting pumped all over the world, but there are other good players out there and there's strength and depth in the English game.
Yeah, and it's not just England, right? I mean, me and you closely follow Sri Lanka. There's loads of Sri Lankan players involved.
Yeah,
in this league and in Bangladesh and in South Africa as well, right?
Yeah, and masses of West Indians as well. So, I think that at a time this franchise cricket is serving these players, and hopefully. We're going to see a resurgent West Indies in the international scene, given how many of their players are playing regular franchise cricket.
We'd all love that. Shall we move on and talk about? We'll come to the 100 discussion at the end. Let's talk about this situation, but in the BPL, I'm not following the BPL. I don't know if you've managed to watch any of it, but what I am following is this situation with Durba Rajshahi, one of the teams in it, where basically the owners have just failed to pay any of the staff involved in it, including the players. The players are kind of the foreign overseas players are kind of barricaded in a hotel, not allowed to leave until that's been paid. The bus driver has kind of locked the kit up of the players in his bus till he gets paid. And the Bangladesh government have kind of stepped in and kind of laid down the law and said that the owner has till the 10th of February, which sounds like a long way away because it feels like January the 1st was only yesterday, but he's got 4 more days. And the point of us talking about this to pay these guys, and presumably there's women in the staff as well, all kind of face the consequences. I mean, how do I phrase this thing? I mean, this just doesn't look very good for the league at all, does it? Even though I've messaged on WhatsApp, on Instagram. We talked to a few of the other players involved in this league, and they said they've got absolutely no problems playing for the teams they're playing in. They've come to Bangladesh for several years and enjoyed playing the league and had a great time. But this one kind of bad egg is doing a lot of damage here, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a terrible look for the BPL. Yeah, I mean, it's just nothing short of a shit show, right? I think the overseas players boycotted a game or didn't play, and I've been seeing reports that they don't even have return tickets, so they're essentially stuck in Bangladesh being unpaid. I think local players have checked out the team hotel, as you said, Marky. The bus driver has hijacked kits and refused to give them back. I mean, this sort of shit just shouldn't be happening in professional cricket, right? It's completely laughable. It makes a mockery of the game. And, you know, for people who are doing a job and aren't getting paid, I'm sure it's really, really galling. So we hope this gets resolved. If not, should Bangladesh forfeit their place in the Champions Trophy and let Sri Lanka step into that tournament? I think that would be the noble thing to do.
Haven't Sri Lanka fans suffered enough recently, Nick? Do we want to go there and get absolutely hammered, or we could do what Denmark did in Euro '92 and come off, come together last minute and win it? I don't know. That'd be great. I mean, like, I'm fairly outspoken about Sri Lanka's rivalry with Bangladesh, but I don't think I want to see that. So if some team did want to stand aside and let Sharath Asalanka and the boys come in, ride into victory, then I'd be absolutely behind it if that was the consensus. But yeah, that kind of feels a bit much, doesn't it? I think the other kind of when people online are talking about this situation in the BPL, they're talking about there's a lot of talk about how there is no protection for, I'm going to call them freelance cricketers, right? And it's a kind of interesting thing to discuss because, you know, a lot of people will say, I have no protection in my job. If I'm totally reliant on the honesty of the people I work for to come and pay me. It's just kind of reputational damage here, isn't it? I'm not sure how much you can kind of regulate against it.
Yeah, because it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, I guess there can be maybe stronger player unions or something like that, like we see in the NBA where you've got real player power, but how that works in a landscape where there are loads of different leagues operating in one ecosystem is a bit more complex. But I think you're right, Marky. The upshot here is reputational damage and the unfortunate consequences that the BPL is going to struggle to get decent caliber overseas players as a result of this, right? And as we've said, it's one bad apple who is really doing a lot to damage league, which has like slowly built a decent reputation, a growing reputation over the past decade or so, and now it seems that has been kind of largely undone in one fell swoop.
Yeah, the one thing that could be done though is the boards when they set these leagues up, because we had a kind of similar issue in the LPL last year. Well, kind of similar, where owners basically dropped out, were forced to kind of give up their teams very last minute. I think one of the things that could be done is basically as soon as a player is signed, or when the owner, who the owner is going to be for a team for any particular season, they've just got to pay up their entire wage bill before a ball is bowled, right?
Yeah, and they pay it to the board, who then distribute it at a later date to the players.
Yeah. I think that might
seems like
be the way.
Solution.
And also, including that, they've got to put the wage bill out for the rest of the staff as well. Bus driver, onwards, upwards, and anyone who's below, anyone who's part of the organisation. I don't want to say below the bus driver; that's an awful thing to say. But you know what I mean, right? Anyone in the pyramid.
Presumably all these owners are getting decent bits of money from broadcast deals, etc. And so the fact that they aren't paying people who are the lifeblood of their franchises, who are helping stuff run, is really inexcusable.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about broadcast deals, should we talk about the 100? Because as we were on air last week, we were getting news of teams being sold. This week, it's moved on quite a lot. So the Mumbai Indians are now proud owners of 49%. That's very important, of the Oval Invincibles. There is a tech conglomerate or a couple of tech billionaires who are now 49% owners of the London Spirit. They also own quite a significant chunk, or they also own, not quite significant, the whole of the Washington franchise in Major League Cricket. So this isn't their first kind of foray into cricket. But the kind of bigger news, I think the biggest news of the week in terms of the 100 is that the Sunrisers franchise group own 100% of the Northern Superchargers, where they were able to do a deal where they bought the chunk that the ECB was selling at, the 49%, the 49%, and also do a deal with Yorkshire to buy the 51% that they owned off the team. I'm really fascinated by this, Nick, because there's a lot of discourse about what exactly do they own. Essentially, they own the right to run a side during the franchise tournament that is staged. I assume there's a company called The 100, or if there isn't, there will be. But the franchise tournament that is staged by essentially this company that at the moment I imagine is controlled by the ECB, right?
Yeah. There's been a lot of talk about this. I mean, first of all, there's, I think, been surprise throughout the world, the figures that have been thrown around. Overall, I think the ECB and some of the counties have generated 466 million already, with still 2 franchises to sell. So that's way in excess of their estimates. I think they were hoping to make 350 million. And I'd say there's been a fair bit of derision as well. I'm sure lots of people have read Johnny Liu's article in The Guardian where he compared this to that art installation featuring a banana skin stuck to a wall. And I think it is, I understand what people are saying, that there aren't any tangible assets here. They don't own the players, they don't own the grounds, and at the moment 100 teams play between 8 and 10 games a year, so you're not getting a huge bank of cricket. The sort of general consensus seems to be that this is just billionaires throwing their wealth about. I am inclined to see it slightly differently, and I think that if you've got people who, look, these guys aren't idiots. I mean, the group who've bought the Spirit includes, Satya Nadella, the Microsoft CEO, Sundar Pichai, the Google guy. These guys, I don't think, just throw out 145 million on a whim. And I would imagine that these sales precede possibly news. Number one, I would have thought that the BCCI is going to change its regulations around Indian players' availability for overseas leagues, which would overnight make the 100, increasing massively more valuable. That would probably trigger a huge broadcast deal in India. And I wonder also whether we might see an expanded league. I know that the English county season is tight and that there's a lot of cricket to get into 4 or 5 months, but whether we might see teams playing twice as much through August, so this becomes a 16-game league rather than 8-game league. Something that really caught my eye is, I mean, you touched on, Marky, the Sunrisers and the Superchargers collab, which I didn't realize was on the table until it happened. I thought that only 49% stake was up for sale. I've seen that LSG owners have also got 70% of the Manchester Originals. So how that looks in practice, how much input those franchises can have, will be really interesting. But the fact that this tech conglomerate paid 145 million for 49% stake in the Spirit, as opposed to Mumbai Indians paying 60 million for 49% stake in the Oval Invincibles. That's interesting, because I understand that Spirit's got the Lords factor, but they've been rubbish in terms of their players thus far. And, if the motivation here is broadcast deals, you would think they'd be split equally between the 6 teams. So I understand why the London Spirit are slightly more valuable than a team like the Welsh Fire, who've been dog shit and also don't get anyone going to their games and are based in Cardiff, which is probably seen as slightly less desirable to foreign owners than London. No offense to Cardiff, big up my Mandem in Cardiff. But yeah, I'm surprised. I can see why there's a little bit of discrepancy there, but I don't think it should be 145 versus 35 million.
Yeah, it's really weird, right? I don't get how that some of the valuations have come about as well. I totally agree with you. So the rumor I've heard, the rumor that's going around, is that the the group that own the Mumbai Indians, who are the Ambani family, who own Reliance in India, one of, if not the biggest company in India and the richest family in India, that they are in, let's say, in talks about trying the BCCI contracted players out to play these tournaments. The other thing that's worth considering is that there is now this whole idea from the IPL about how players become un-Indian capped. So you can, MS Dhoni no longer is considered an Indian cap player. I just think some of these people are kind of banking the house on, or spending a lot of money on the idea that this will happen. And it's really interesting when you talk to people in cricket about whether or not you think this will happen. A lot of people are of the opinion that it just is the one unmovable thing in cricket, that will never be allowed to play, that the BCCI understand the value of the IPL, and that they understand that they suddenly can't be in a situation where Bumrah and Jaiswal are allowed to travel the whole world to go and play cricket. I suspect, though, that it will have to happen at some point because of the sheer amount of money that is involved in all of this. I also suspect that there's two things. I think the IPL owners and a lot of these guys who might not own IPL teams but are involved in sport in America or have other sporting interests who are involved in it, I think they'll be much, much better at running these franchises than the current lot who do it. Like, bless the ECB, there's some lovely people there, but let's be honest, English cricket has been incredibly badly run since effectively any of us can remember, right? The county cricket year on year gets smaller and smaller. There's less interest in it whatsoever. I mean, I'd say the two most well-known and popular cricketers in English cricketers are still to this day Ian Botham and then Freddie Flintoff, right? I think they've totally failed when it comes to marketing the sport. Joe Root and Jimmy Anderson could walk into any pub in Britain, and unless it was within a few hundred meters of a cricket stadium, they could go and have a pint and absolutely no one would bother them. And that is, I say that as a derogatory thing, not because English people are so great, but because basically nobody knows what the great English players are up to or what they're doing. They've hidden the game behind the paywall for so long, and it's kind of fallen out of public consciousness. I think there's an opportunity here to give it to, I see these companies that have brought them in. Yeah, they own sports brands, sports teams, but essentially they're marketing companies, right? They are marketing out a product. Me and you spent the beginning of this show talking about the Mumbai Indians as a kind of organization, but what are they? They are something that gets together and basically markets a team out and create this identity and culture around it. And that's what they're going to be trying replicating individually and try and act as one together as owners to try and grow the league as much as possible. So I agree, Nick. I think you just don't spend this kind of money if you don't think you're going to get a return on it. These people are rich; they're not stupid. So I wonder what they know, and I think some people have this idea that a load of Indian and Asian billionaires have turned up and been sold the kind of ECB dream. I mean, these guys are like the billionaires. Let's be honest; they're steps ahead. They're sprinting ahead of the guys from the ECB, so they know exactly what they're doing, and they'll have a plan and they'll be out there to try and execute it. I'd imagine. I'm kind of excited about the future of the 100. I think it's good moves. If you're a cricket fan in England, I think this is a great step forward.
Yeah, man, this is a massive boon for English cricket, and I don't quite understand the stance of anyone saying otherwise. I mean, I think you're right that this league has been run into the ground since its inception. And for the ECB to be able to generate well north of £500 million off a league which is basically dog shit is, I mean, it's a massive boon, and a lot of that money is going to be redistributed to the counties. So this can only be a good thing for English cricket. I do think it's on the surface strange that these teams have been valued so much higher than, say, franchises in the SA20 or the MLC, for example, were. I think that, yeah, I agree with you, Marky. I don't think these billionaires go around splashing cash just to own a part of English cricket. And I think that we are probably heading towards an arm wrestle between the BCCI and the IPL franchise owners over Indian player availability. And my sense would be that the IPL owners are in a pretty strong position there, because the IPL is by far the most valuable asset to Indian cricket, right? But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I think the overwhelming likelihood is that the Southern Brave go to the Delhi Capitals group, the GMR, who've already bought a significant stake in Hampshire. And then the one team left on the table is Trent Rockets. Is it going to be Rajasthan Trent Rockets? Because I mean, they've got teams all over the shop, so I wouldn't be surprised if they want a piece of this too. And I wonder if we're slowly but surely kind of heading towards a world where there is more congruence between MI Emirates, MI Cape Town, Mumbai Indians, MI Oval Invincibles, and we start to see kind of a bit more consistency between squads, and something that I guess is more kind of equatable to like the Premier League in football, but played in stages across the world throughout the year.
I think you kind of see that slightly if you look at the movements of particularly West Indian and Sri Lankan players, where they are kind of entering a franchise team. If you look at, well, I was going to say Teach. He's obviously just moved from CSK in the IPL, but he was playing for all their iterations, wasn't he? For a while, and Patarana was as well. I think Puran has been in the past as well. Have I just made that up? And was Dre Russ not involved in all the
Dre Russ
Night Riders?
a lot of the Night Riders teams, yeah. As has Narayan.
Yes.
So we are seeing it with overseas players, and you can see the benefits for players and for organizations, right? That they get to work with the same coaches that it makes sense. And I mean, I'm sure there will be a bit of player churn. The local player situation in lots of these leagues means that you can't necessarily have exactly the same squad under current rules in, say, the IPL as you can in the SA20. But whether, we'll start to see more players having MI affiliates, as an example, I think we might.
If I was one of the owners, if I owned the Superchargers, if I was working for the Sunrisers, and my first meeting with the rest of the kind of 100 owners and the ECB and everyone, all the other states involved in it, the two things I'm looking to do is looking to raise the salary cap, because I just think it's too low, and that's across both genders. Raise the salary cap, and also try and bash down the number of local players that you have to have. If you could, I think there's a great opportunity here for if you want to grow the 100, be like, right, we want to be the league that has. You're lucky because in England there's still a really good number of really talented T20 players, but we want to be the league where we have kind of 4 local in any 11, 4 local players, and the rest are all from the best players we can possibly get. We want to get to a point, we want to attract the best players over, when the best South Africans, best Aussies, the best players from South Asia, the best West Indian players, and eventually the best Indian players. We want to get them all over, and we want to have that kind of SummerSlam vibe to it, to bring it back to kind of wrestling analogies. So, the best players in the world are going to be in England in August. And I think what that will mean is that actually, as we're seeing in the Premier League, is in the long term, that will benefit the England cricket team, because it will mean only the best players cut through as well. For me, a lot of the conversation about is this going to degrade county cricket is kind of null and void, because let's be absolutely brutal about it. If your dad didn't take you to county cricket, you ain't going. Like, there's so few people turn up to most of these games, apart from blast matches, which are really well marketed, and also is an audience that is robust, right? That is not going away, because the people who love going to the blast love going to the blast. But people aren't waking up one morning and deciding 100 or county. That is not a conversation that people are having.
But No, I quite agree. And also the 100's here to stay either way, right? It's, that ship has sailed. And if you reduce the number of English players in it, say you have 5 local slots in a team, as you said, Marky, then you've got 30 English players playing plus say another 15 in squads. You've only got 45 players involved in the 100. And that means that August is suddenly kind of freed up again. The 50 over trophy can become a more real thing that involves, like for good players. I think if the 100 can do that, it's got a good shot of rivaling the IPL and being right up there in the best leagues in the world, especially if they can get Indian players involved. Because, there isn't a huge amount of competition in August. I think the only other league that's running concurrently is the CPL, sometimes the LPL, but that's not exactly set in stone. I think what's inarguable now is that the 100-ball format is going to go, and that we're going to see this operating as a T20 league at some stage, whether that's for the 2025 season or further down the line. We'll have to wait and see.
Hopefully that the 100-ball format leaves.
Oh, and I also think they need to bin the draft and do an auction. I know that some people think that auctions are degrading meat markets and a bad way to treat professional sports people, but I think they're really entertaining.
If you're a middle-class English person, you probably met your partner in a meat market, so don't knock it too much. Nick, should we leave it there? There's loads to discuss next week, so we'll have finals of all the tournaments that we're following to talk about. And I'm sure there'll be more developments in the 100, because I've heard that there's expansion down the line, and there is one more team to sell as well. And we might even hear a bit more about if the fellas in Bangladesh have been paid. Who knows?
And we're slowly inching our way towards IPL previews, aren't we? I saw that the English county season starts less than 2 months from now. So things are moving on. Always stuff happening, and more cricket to look forward to.
Wicked. Thanks a lot. If you're watching or listening or whatever, whichever way you found out, hit subscribe, hit follow, tell all your friends about us. We're called The Big Bag. We'll be back next week. Bye.
Bye.